Welcome to the 2024 Sundance Film Festival. My name is Sudeep Sharma. I'm a programmer and at the festival. I'm really happy to be moderating this Cinema Café, which is presented by Audible. We want to thank them for their support. We're just gonna get started. We're really excited for this conversation. Our panelists today are all directors here at the festival. We have Carla Gutiérrez, who's director of FRIDA. We have Lucy Lawless, who is the director of Never Look Away. And we have Lana Wilson, director of Look Into My Eyes. I'm going to steal an opening question from Kim Yutani, who's our director of programming, and I've seen her ask this before, and I think it's a great one. When you were growing up, what did you want to be?
Oh, yeah. Should I go first?
Yeah.
Okay. My father always remembers this story, but he asked me that when I was little, and I said, I want to be the minister that handles money in Peru. That's where I grew up. Who is that? The person that looks out for all the money. No,
counts it or collects it or just all of it?
I just wanted to be around money, I guess. I don't know. I thought I was going to be an engineer or get into math, and I actually followed that path until college. So film was a late discovery.
I wanted to be an actress from my earliest age.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You know, to be honest, I was really focused growing up on one thing only, which wasn't a profession. I grew up in Seattle. I was focused on moving to New York and living in New York. And that was the goal. And I still feel that way. Just being in New York, I have succeeded in all of my life's dreams, in a way. So that was my sole focus. But I definitely never thought that I could be a filmmaker.
Right. You did think that?
No, the idea never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I mean, then how did all of you, I'll start with you, Lucy, though, like if you wanted to be an actress, like what part of acting did you want to do and why? What was about it that called you?
To be honest, I did flirt with the idea of being a forensic pathologist because I was watching a show called Quincy MD in the 70s. And then I realized I'm not that good at science. Maybe I'll just play one on TV. But I remember the moment that I realized this was a job, and we were watching television with my brothers. I've got 5 brothers, and they were making fun of some woman on TV doing an ad, and they said, they get paid heaps of money for that, and I went, that's a job? I was like, in that moment, I must have been 8, I went, I could do that? Any idiot could do that.
Well, and I'll start with you, Lana, how did you know, you said you didn't know you'd be a filmmaker. Like, when was the thing that you thought, even before being a director, like, you'd want to work in the industry?
Yeah. Well, I studied film history and choreography in college. And so after college, I was making dances. I worked at Film Forum, the movie theater in New York. I then worked for 8 years at an art biennial called Performa, and I was a film and dance curator there. So for a long time, I was on that side of things. And I did want to make work, and I was, nights and weekends coming up with ideas for films, for documentaries, writing scripts, that kind of thing, but I just really never had the courage to do it. But I did find myself working with artists, always being a bit jealous of them. And I did that for 8 years, and then one day I had an idea for a film, and I started to become jealous of the theoretical director who would make that movie. And I started to think, man, what if they do it this way or that way? It probably won't be good. And I was complaining about this imaginary film that didn't exist by an imaginary director I was jealous of. And a friend of mine at the time said, Lana, the only thing stopping you from being a filmmaker is making a film. And I realized how true that was, and that I just needed to kind of put aside all my little fears and just kind of do it.
And you said that you thought you'd be an engineer. It's interesting, editing obviously is so connected, I think, almost to a science. And
yeah.
How did you move into thinking about making films in general?
So I was getting a math major in college, but I was also taking some art studio classes, and I was making sculptures. And there were 2 things that kind of like introduced me to the idea of filmmaking, specifically documentaries. One was I watched a film. And it was a documentary about the relationship between a little girl, an undocumented immigrant in LA, and her teacher. I'm so bad with names, I don't remember the title. But it was at the time in California when teachers were gonna be asked, there was gonna be a law that was gonna pass in California that would ask teachers to report undocumented students. And I was like, oh my God, you can, really marry social issues. I was so touched and really shaken by the film. You can marry social issues with art. And I was like, I want to watch more. I really, really want to watch more. And then I took an experimental video class, and that was the first editing that I did. And I was like, this is fun. Yeah.
I think you've all had interesting journeys to directing specifically, and I'm curious what. And now I want to talk about your specific films in a second, but like, what was the motivation to actually take that on specifically to direct, especially for you? Yeah, I mean, and so people know that you've edited many films. You've edited many films here at the festival, including our RBG. I always get those two letters confused.
RGB, RBG. Yeah. Notorious RBG.
And Caesar's Last Fast too, which I really love a lot. I was just wondering, how did you always want to direct, or did you?
So I went to film school once I decided that I loved documentaries, and production at film school gave me a bit of a stomachache that I did not enjoy. And then editing gave me a different kind of like stomach feelings, like butterflies, that I really loved. And so I went into editing, and I've, been lucky enough to get involved with like really amazing films and amazing filmmakers. And I was always really happy with the creative, kind of like access that I had. And then I would finish the film, and the directors would take it out and be like, peace out, good luck, and that was it. And it was very relaxing afterwards. And Sundance was really, about watching films and seeing friends. Very different, this Sundance. But, the story called me, and, just to be clear, I edited FRIDA. I don't think, for me, directing is like an additive thing. It's like something that I'm adding to my role. But the creative process that happens in that conversation of, building the story in the edit room, like, I don't think I'm ever wanna step away from that. So, I guess I'm an editor/director now.
For Lucy, this is your feature debut.
What possessed me to direct?
Yeah.
I never had any intention. Are you all filmmakers? You're all filmmakers. Wow. Respect, man. I never intended to direct. I got this cold call, an email from the executor of my subject, Margaret Moth's estate. Well, actually her best friend and the heir to her suitcase full of photographs. And I assumed that it had been sent to like 100 other people, and I was instantly possessed by I made this rash promise immediately. I mean, within 90 seconds of reading it. I went all back to, I remember who this is. She's my compatriot, a woman from New Zealand, first camera woman in Australasia. That's Australia and New Zealand. And I wrote back and said, I will find the money. I made all these crazy promises. I didn't even think about my role in it. I didn't know what it would be, but I said, I will find the money, I will find the producers, we'll get this made for real. And then was castigating myself, going, oh my God, who am I to say that? I don't know how to do this. But I was so dyed into that decision in that moment that it turned out there was nobody more intensely focused on this project than me. And somebody said, why don't you direct? I went, oh, don't be silly. And I went, of course I should. There's absolutely nobody who cares about this like I do. And somehow that possession of the idea, when it owns you, when the story is so big it wants to use you to tell itself, gives you a kind of charisma that other people want to get on board, I think. So you find that idea that you will break down brick walls with your head, and you will know about this, and you will see the project through because It's hard. You're going to get a world of no, or we are going to get a world of no, but double down on your vision and dare to be specific, because that universal appeal of being so specific and so truthful to what is important to you, it will resonate throughout. You just got to trust other people are going to be interested in what you are moved by.
I love that. It's so true. You have to become madly obsessed to get a kind of charisma that can then convince all these other people to come on the journey with you. And
Yeah, they want to feel safe in the decision to back you. So,
right.
Yeah.
And that is like half the job. It's like keeping everyone excited and going towards the same goal. It's so true. But yeah, I guess for me, why directing? I think movies for me have always been this place where I go to make sense of the world or try to understand myself, try to understand other people. I think it's not unlike what religion is for a lot of people. And in fact, my film here, Look Into My Eyes, is kind of about how psychic readings can be that space, similar to religion or similar to art, a place where you go to understand who we are as human beings better. And there's nothing I love more than having, an emotionally intense, cathartic experience in a movie theater. And so I think what I'm so drawn to is the chance to create a kind of experience that I haven't seen yet, and to get to share that with other people. And directing for me is, it involves all the art forms. It's music, it's writing, it is sort of choreography in a way, because you're choreographing things with, I was not a good choreographer, so I'm really glad I left that behind. I'm actually having flashbacks as we speak to the last dance I ever choreographed, where I was alone on stage with a cutout of Michael Jordan in a tuxedo, and I was dancing to a Jonathan Richman song. And I remember being on stage thinking, Lana, you should never do this again. So I'm really glad I'm not doing that anymore. But choreography, all the arts are in film, and that's what I love about it. But I think with my first film, it was that desire to create an experience that I didn't think was there. Because my first film, so I was working this other job that I mentioned as a curator, this performance art biennial, and it was 2009, and this abortion provider named Dr. George Tiller was assassinated in his own church. He was handing out programs, and someone came in and shot him. And I was so upset seeing the news coverage of this. I was upset by what had happened, but I was equally upset by the way the media was covering it, this kind of two-sidesism, where they say, well, some people are for abortion, some people are against it. There was nothing about who this man was. There was nothing about why patients would seek abortions later in pregnancy, which is why this doctor was so controversial. And it was just kind of an abstract intellectual debate about when does life begin. And I found it so frustrating. And I just started to think this is a destructive debate, that the way it's positioned in the media, I would love to know the human beings inside this world. And I wanted to know, is anyone left now that this man has been assassinated? Are there other abortion providers who will keep working? Do they have targets on their backs? What is it like to be them? All of these questions felt urgent, kind of like you were saying. You have to feel urgent and obsessed, and like it's the most important thing in the world. And I think this is when I started to think someone's going to make that film and it'll be great. Then I realized no one was going to make that film, that I had to make the film. And I think the urgency of it, to me, I convinced myself that for me at that moment it was the most important thing in the world, and I had to make it. And
who funded that? How did you get the money to?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, yeah, it was So that's what started the film. Who funded it? Oh my goodness. So I will say too, I got a friend to work with me on it. Martha Shane directed the film with me. She had made documentaries before, so she knew what she was doing, and I could learn from her. So that's how we made the first film. The funding, it was a lot of cold calling anyone we could think of. It took years, cold calling anyone who'd been involved with reproductive justice in any way. It was hard, though, because third trimester abortion is not something even most people in the pro-choice community support. So that's what's tricky about it. And a lot of people who were involved in pro-choice were like, we do not want to be associated with this. But a few brave people eventually were willing to be associated with it and were willing to give us some support. So that's how we eventually funded it.
I love hearing you both describe it as obsession and urgency, because with FRIDA, it's a story that has happened a long time ago, right? She was alive from 1907 until 1954. But it was that urgency and that sense that if I don't do it and I don't do it now, nobody's gonna do it the way that I think should be done. Nobody has done it like that before. So there is like that obsession and urgency that like it has to be me now. And you know, with FRIDA, there's been a lot of academic work. There's a lot of, you know, her story has been told many, many times. A lot of people have done a lot of, you know, intellectual work about her art and her life. But it was, you know, really discovering her own words in those books and then realizing that she could maybe tell her own story. That was really exciting and urgent for me, but it wasn't obvious. And I think it was my editing eyes that like saw that, because nobody had done that before, because it wasn't like she was really telling her whole life in her words. We really needed to dig in, do a lot of research, but I knew that, you know, I was bringing that experience from an editing perspective to be able to do that. And that was like the why me and why now, and you know, and let's do it. And the obsession to like get everybody excited about it. Yeah.
Can I?
Go ahead. No. This is great.
I read about your film and about the making of it, but I didn't understand, are there any actual recordings of her voice?
No, there's no recordings of her voice.
Why not?
Because I guess nobody was smart enough to ask her questions.
Oh my God!
There's a lot of photos. And, you know, her father was a photographer, so she had this relationship with the camera from early on. And we're lucky to have, you know, in the 1920s, there are very few families in Mexico that had a lot of photographs. But she did, because her father was a photographer. And then later on, when, you know, she came to the United States, she discovered that photographers really were interested in taking her picture. But where? Because she, you know, she came to the States like wearing traditional, and she obviously, you know, you've all seen an image of Frida Kahlo, right? I mean, you turn around and she's looking at you in like, you know, a street in Brooklyn or somewhere in Europe or in Latin America, and those eyebrows are, you know, you're very recognizable. So she was striking, but she really took ownership of her image, and she knew how to work the camera. I mean, in a way, her paintings are a camera. Like she, you know, I said before, it's like she was doing selfish, selfies. Yeah. Selfies with her paintings. Like most of them are self-portraits. And yeah, she really took control of her image and said, okay, everybody's really looking at me in America. I look different. I sound different. I'm gonna, you know, like be in power and really take control of that image and like show myself the way that I want to. So, but no recordings. There was a recording like 3 years ago that came out that somebody said, this is Frida Kahlo reading a book, like a children's book. And then, if I get this story correct, somebody came up and said, no, that's my grandmother. So, so no recording of her voice, which really freed our team to be creative with it. You know, when we got the actress for her voice, we were looking for this combination of maturity, but also like the curiosity and
I'd use your voice.
Love. What?
I'd use your voice.
Oh, funny story. So, so we used my voice reluctantly throughout the entire editing of the film, because, you know, that was the easiest way to like edit and record a lot of things, and I didn't suck. It wasn't that bad. I added a little bit of emotion in there, and actually a couple of producers were like, maybe we could save some money, just use your voice. And I was like, no, I have a Peruvian accent. I'm not Mexican. I will get crucified, and then, you know, people be like, why is the director voicing Frida Kahlo? So,
is it in English?
It's in Spanish. I mean, that was one of the, you know, and I feel that like that's, you know, one of the things that was really important for me was to be authentic to her voice, like guided by her voice. And obviously, you know, her voice is mostly in Spanish, although she wrote in English as well, and some Spanish. If you've seen the film or when you watch it, like the flowery language that she uses, especially when she's like talking about French intellectuals or like rich New Yorkers, is, you know, really special experience.
I love how you're saying that her voice, her writings was the way into it, because I think we should be clear too. Like, all your films are documentaries about just really remarkable and just strong-willed people. And I was wondering for all of you, like, how do you get into presenting their story? Like someone like Margaret Moth is just, they're such a badass person, like, and that what was your inside track to present their story in your film?
Yeah, the difficulty in my film is that Margaret is not alive. Because she was a camera person, she's always behind the camera, very few moving images of her. She also comes from a background of that fostered no introspection, no self-kind, no love for self, and the siblings very distant because of a very cold upbringing. And so she didn't introspect. And some of her friends weren't that good. If they were too close to her, they weren't that useful to me. So it was the people who weren't who had their own truth, and by getting this constellation of opinions about this very unusual woman, you, the audience, get to make up your mind who she was. And I guarantee if you go a duo, the two of you go, you'll have slightly different opinions, about who's the most reliable witness. So that's the fun of it. That's what I want you to have as your own. It's one of those books where you choose the ending, that I'll go to page 45 or page 37. It's one of those kind of films. So you piece together who this woman was, from being a thrill-seeking iconoclast and a total hedonist to being somebody who does achieve some kind of grace in the end, but through a really treacherous journey with a lot of wild friends. And just who her friends were is what informs you. And loved a heroine ad. Never met a heroine ad she didn't love.
I was wondering with your protagonist also, sometimes we don't get to see an image of them, but we get to see them through the way that they saw the world. So I can't wait to see kind of like the footage that she shot when she was.
Yeah, what I think was really helpful in my film is that she wasn't there. Mm-hmm. Because it keeps the audience leaning in to the hunt. It's chercher la femme, and you're on this hunt. So everything's designed to sort of pull you along, going, ooh, that doesn't feel right. Oh, really? And I think if she was there, it would take all the hunt out of it. So you have done lots of biopics. How do you deal with that sort of thing?
You mean the kind of peeling back the layers of the person over the course of the film?
They can give a definitive, oh no, this is my truth.
Right. Well, the interesting thing, and actually I was lucky enough to get to work with Carla, who is such a genius, for a little bit. She's one of the editors on Pretty Baby, Brooke Shields' previous film. So, she deserves applause just for her brilliance, I agree. The interesting thing is that, there's their story, their account. For example, Brooke Shields had written 2 memoirs, but then there's your perspective on them. Yeah. And in the case of Brooke Shields, for example, there's her personal story, and then there's the story of what Brooke Shields, the cultural symbol, represented at different points in time. And that's a lot turned out to be about the Madonna whore dichotomy, basically, and about America's kind of morally hypocritical imagery that it projected to the rest of the world at different times. Brooke Shields became a bit of a vehicle for that. She was a very sexualized girl and presented in this highly, highly sexualized, exploitative way. And then in the late 70s, and then in the 80s, she became this kind of symbol of Reagan-era purity and virginity culture. So there is their story, but often what you'd see is different than their story. You can't say that's not your story. It's their experience. It's their life. But I think that it is so important to have this wider view in the film. And it could still be a very intimate film. Like I made this film about Taylor Swift. It's very focused on one moment in time, very present tense. But the wider view being like, what is the overarching story here, and what is more universal about the internal experience this person's having? Because I think there is a lot that you can't see about yourself. You know, at least
Yeah.
I feel that way. Maybe, you know what I mean? There's a lot you're blinded to, and you actually, this is why, you know, people go to therapists and psychics. It's really helpful to have someone look at you and not just watch you, but witness you. And I think that the reason a lot of documentary subjects agree to be in documentaries is because they're curious about the mirror that will be held up to them, what will be reflected back, and the story that will be told. You know, I think they're kind of on a journey for more self-knowledge and self-understanding the same way we all are and want that experience.
And sorry,
No, go ahead.
we're taking
No,
over.
no. Yes.
No, but I mean, you know, having the experience of being able to work with amazing directors as Lana, I mean, no, it's true. Like when you're doing a profile film, you know, it's really easy to, you know, get into this trap of just like listing the things that the person did, like the details of their lives. I mean, that's what we try not to do with FRIDA, right? But like working with you, there was like a very insightful point of view, and that really guides you into how you're gonna build the story and like what you're gonna choose from the interview.
This is a dream editor. This is the kind of editor you want. That.
No, but it's really like the you know, the really understanding and the thematic knowledge of the directors that really guide that, you know, and so yay for great directors.
I do think like one of the most extraordinary things in that film with Brooke Shields is that you also take her on that journey with you. Like I think you see her actually. It's not just like, oh, you're looking at it, but like she kind of comes with you and throughout the film. And I was wondering, like, were you making that at the same time as Look Into My Eyes, and how was that connected?
I was. Brooke actually offered to do a psychic reading, and be in Look Into My Eyes, which I thought was a great idea. And I don't know why we didn't do it, but I started Look Into My Eyes at the beginning of the pandemic. I was in New York City during the entire pandemic, and a couple months in, I'd had this idea for this film about psychic readings for a few years, but as soon as the pandemic began, that's when I thought, I think this is the moment to do it. We're all obviously more isolated than ever, lonelier than ever. The preciousness of human connection has new meaning now. And so I thought, this is when I'm gonna do it. So I started making the film. Then the Brooke Shields project came to me, and I was really excited about it, wanted to do it. So I did do it quite quickly, in a year and a half total, while continuing to do a little bit of psychics. And then I finished the psychics project on the other side of that. And I actually really love doing two projects at the same time, especially when they're wildly different. No, because then you can go, you're like, okay, what a great problem to have. It's exhausting, but the good thing is that I think that if they're very different, you'll naturally go into slightly more extreme places apart with both of them. You know, like Pretty Baby being a single character. Look Into My Eyes has no main character and has no story or timeline. You know what I mean? And I was like, I can be comfortable with that because I'm using this other part of my head on this right now.
How did you find the shape? If you don't have a script, like I didn't have a script, how did you find the shape of Look Into My Eyes?
Yeah. So there are 7 psychics in Look Into My Eyes. There are many, many clients. And the shape, there was stuff I knew at the beginning, and then it was kind of banging my head against the wall with our amazing editor, Hannah Buck, for a long time in the edit, but then finally arriving with a bunch of learnings at the end. At the beginning, what I knew was that I wanted it to start with the clients and end with the psychics. And I wanted it to be this flipping, mirroring experience, so that over the course of the film, you realize that all of the psychics were themselves once clients, and they're there because they had a transformative experience and felt that they wanted to give that to other people. So we start with all these clients, and then we get to know some of the psychics. We go home with them. We learn that they're all actors and performers. Many of them are creative people. Then we start to learn that they had some kind of formative trauma or loss in their lives that brought them to this kind of healing that can come from a psychic reading. We look at the ethics, the complexity of psychic readings. Are they real or not real? Does it matter at all? And then the final third of the film is looking at all of that in the bigger context of film and art and performance, and how film and art and performance are themselves artificial, but they're also real. And I think the same is true of a psychic reading. And without giving anything away, in the final moments of the film, something happens that punctures the construct of the whole film. And I hope that you think, wow, this was all artificial, and I know that now. But this experience I had was still real and still meaningful, and an emotional experience is real for the person going through it, even if what's happening might be considered imaginary. So that whole structure, it's not a 3-act structure. Even when I describe it, I'm like, this sounds insane. It doesn't sound like a good treatment, in my opinion. I could just see Carla thinking, no, Lana, no, this should have been.
What I'm thinking is that I'm like 5 o'clock today. I'm there to watch. Okay, let's sit together.
But that's what, so it was just starting with that mirror flipping concept, client to psychic, but we ended with it's kind of just like, with this film, with the Brooke Shields project, Carla knows, I had a really detailed treatment with beats and acts and all of that. This project could not work that way, and ultimately I just had to accept no main character, no storyline. The only thread is the emotional journey the audience is going on, and that actually does a bit match a classical Hollywood structure in a way, in that you start out in one place and then 15 minutes in, you're suddenly in a whole new world. There's a midpoint, you know what I mean? So I think the audience's experience matches the hero's journey a little bit, but it's invisible and you're having it in the theater alone. It's not on the screen.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
But I don't know your guys' processes with that too.
I mean, I have to say, like, so much respect for you going from one extreme to the other, because, I mean, when I started documentaries, it was because of like the social issue impact, right? Like I really, and as a young editor, I mean, it's not like I had many choices. Like, I was asked, like, do you want this job? And I was just like, yes, I want to get paid. So just whatever you're working on, like, I'll edit it. But I really wanted to work on films because of the subject matter, and that's changed a lot now. Now and I think same as a director, if I have the chance to do this again, like I'm just really interested in like what's the material to tell a good story, and like how can you tell it? Like that's really interesting to me, because I think that like in every great story you can find ways of like like really address really interesting themes, sometimes like social issue themes, but it's been really interesting to see like the development of my career, how that shifted in terms of like what I'm interested in, and to like take the risk to like do something that doesn't necessarily have like like that treatment that you can do, and have to flow through that like okay.
It was uncomfortable. It led to a lot of tears, a lot of frustration. But those are the best experiences too, and they're so challenging that it pushes you to find some new way of doing it. And that was my big takeaway from this project too. I think I came in overconfident, really, thinking I know how to make films now. Like I'll do the treatment approach I usually do. You know what I mean? And then that did not work at all. Yeah. And it was such a humbling experience. A reminder to me of every film is like the first film.
Yeah.
Every time. And you think you know what you're doing, and then it's like,
oh,
no.
that's a bummer.
Yeah, I know, Lucy.
I'm a little sorry to hear that.
You think it'll be easier next time? No, it won't. But that's what's addictive in a dark way about doing this over and over.
And then that's why you need the obsession that you start with, and like the urgency, because that sustains you through.
Well, I'm so curious to hear for you directing for the first time, Carla, too, because that's such a part, the obsession, the convincing everyone to do it. I once had someone shadow me in my office for a day, another director, and I was kind of at the end point of a couple of projects, and she was listening to my meetings and calls every day, and she's like, so you're constantly having to re-pitch the documentaries and all these meetings? She's like, aren't they funded and aren't they almost done? And I was like, yeah, you're constantly having to re-pitch the documentary, even when it's almost done, because you're the only person that knows what the movie's fundamentally about, and you're basically repeating that to everyone around you for years. But you have to do it to kind of keep everyone motivated, and also to remember yourself what it is, but to keep everyone on what is the fundamental thing about this film. But that's such a huge part of the job too. And what was that like for you to take that on this time?
I mean, I'm really feeling it now, especially now that, the film is out and I have to do press about it. Like that's, I have to continue
to sell.
to sell. Yeah, I mean, and to talk about the film so that we can connect with audiences. And I have to say, I mean, I was very nervous at the beginning. I was incredibly nervous to premiere the film. But I'm quite enjoying it, because I feel that like I'll do anything I have to do to like be able to, you know, have somebody, like convince somebody to watch the film, because I feel like, you know, we do all this work because we love the creative work, but again, that obsession and urgency, like we just really want people to be touched in some way with the film. I mean, for me, FRIDA, you know, FRIDA thematically is about a woman who could not contain her voice and also consciously decided not to contain herself. You know, facing a society that actually hasn't changed much, but like that puts a lot of pressure on a woman, and she was just so loud and she couldn't help herself that like, you know, her feelings just kind of like bled into her paintings. And so like that's how I want to touch people through this film, is like this sense of releasing your, you know, in a very honest, raw way, your, you know, most maybe difficult feelings and like your most intimate emotions. It's a really good thing, and it's cathartic, and like it's necessary, right? And especially now that like, again, like with the selfies, like we're curating our image, we're in a way also protecting ourselves, like to be able to witness a woman who just, you know, couldn't help but to put herself out there in the most honest way. Like, I hope it's an inspiration. So like, yes, I'll be talking about it. And like trying for people to watch it.
Beautiful.
You go, no,
Well, I was just going to ask you too. I'm curious about. We're all moderating with each other now, and like I kind of want to hear like Sudeep's whole career story.
How did you
now
get into
also.
programming?
no one wants to hear that.
You, I mean, worked with so many directors. Did you have in your head as you started this process, I want to be like this kind of director and not like that kind of director? Or were there things, I mean, you know what being a director is so well because you worked with them for so many years. Right?
No, that's why I didn't want to do it, because especially in television, I mean, they just seem so horribly compromised every minute of the day. At least as an actor, when the camera's rolling, it's absolute freedom within the script. Mm-hmm. I don't answer to anybody. You know, maybe maybe the director says something, but then it's up to me to what I want to do with what the director says. But as directors in television, just compromising, clock watching all the time, I was like, that's a chump's job, man. And so I guess I just never thought that I'd ever get into features. I didn't know how this is the biggest surprise of my life. And I would say that Margaret Moth grabbed me by the scruff of my neck and booted me through the directing door. And now I'm totally hooked. Yeah. Now I'm in trouble because I'm like, shit, what am I going to do about now?
Did you feel like you needed to compromise
well,
through the
certainly
process?
With budget, but budget is how you find your style, right? Like none of us ever have enough money. Michael Bay, I bet, complains he doesn't have enough money. And so when we did Diorama, we couldn't afford, we're like, oh, how do we create the world of Sarajevo in 1992 or Lebanon in 1996? We can't afford to go there. We're not feeling animation. Somebody said diorama. I was like, oh, that's a great idea. How do we have the backgrounds? No, you can't have green screen. No, you can't have CGI. No, what you can have, you know what you can afford? A black curtain. I went, perfect. So we lit it for a day with this really like magic hour, golden sort of apricot light, and the buildings are all grey, and the people that are like little action figurines from, if you grew up in the 70s, all the war soldiers, little toy soldiers were like green plastic or grey plastic, which is perfect because we're depicting war scenarios, right? So all the characters are this horrible green plastic because we couldn't afford any other colours, and lit it with this outlandish light, and the sky is black, so it's kind of uncomfortable. It puts the audience in uncanny valley, which is where I want you for a nightmarish scenario, because it's in somebody's memory. We're not in documentary now, we're in memory, and then you help compound that world with sound design, which I'm sure you all feel sound is the best, man, because it can be really subliminal or it can be overt, and your music, that is the way that you walk your audience through the fun house. Like it's a different room. Every room's got a different character, every scene. So, and I think sound's the way that you glue things together or put the audience in a different space. Even if they're not really hearing it consciously, they are subconsciously, somatically in your hands, if you do it right.
So did that experience make you feel you want to do scripted things, or do you want to
Yes.
stay with, you want to do scripted things?
I do actually, only because I'm terrified now. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to do that again. I hate the free fall of not knowing where the hell you're going.
Yeah, well, I can't believe this is your first one as a director. Just listening to you speak is amazing. You have such a clear vision, you know, and that's the main thing. And you're all, you
been a
sound
lot
like you've been
about
directing
thinking
films
of
for years to me. It's amazing.
Well, thank you.
You're
Thank
really
you very
meant to
much.
do this. It's great.
Thank you.
I want to give it a chance to open up the questions, which we'll do in a second, so think about some. But before we do so, you know, all these films too, people are telling real stories, you're dealing with real people, and there's just like trauma and pain. And I'm wondering how you, as a human being, take that in and deal with it as like, this is something that I'm doing as a job, but then also you're a person, and you're, you know, separating the work from just feeling at that moment.
No.
No. Yeah.
No, I don't think. I mean, I don't know if you two have this experience, but I feel that like I'm my work, and I'm my creative, you know, output. Even though is the film is about, you know, about somebody else. There's so much of, you know, how I'm reacting to that material in that film. So, and I would not want to try it. I mean, it makes it for like, you know, hard separation of the work environment and the personal environment. I'm always thinking about it. But I think that as an artist, I don't think you want to stop that like blended line of like, you know, your feelings and your heartbeat, like, you know, coming like, you know, really like jumping into like other people's realities.
Yeah, I guess so. I definitely, I should separate them more. Maybe no. I don't know if there's an emotional separation, or in my life a way to separate yourself from the feelings and experiences you have with the people you're making movies about and with. I do try to create separation in terms of, you know, like looking at my computer or phone or screens, for example, doing that kind of work. Yeah. So I do consider that a way of taking care of yourself. Like, I'm not going to turn on my phone before 9 a.m., you know, and I'm not usually, but I'm not the kind of person who's like up late emailing kind of, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I do separations and try to take care of myself in that way, but the separating from, the feelings, the experiences, the stories, I found that impossible to do. Yeah, but I do, you know, I go to therapy, and I spend most of my time in therapy talking about my films. I mean, I should talk about my other personal issues too, but it's mostly about the films, because there is so much to process, and because being an artist and a creative person, I actually work with a therapist who mostly works with artists, and she tells me over and over, she's just like, I have never worked with anyone who says, you know, how was your experience making that movie or creating that sculpture installation? They're never like, it was great, it was fun, rewarding, went smoothly. That doesn't happen. So this is what you're getting into too. But again, that the challenge every time, and how intense and hard it is every time, is what's so interesting and rewarding about it. But it's always there.
Can I say something else? I feel like, I mean, the really nice thing about documentary filmmaking is that you can do it in community. And I think that's, you know, that's the support that you get also, like, and like to lift you up and like keep you sane. I mean, our film was done in collaboration with, I think, one of my producers here. Where's Katya? No, not Katya, but like the composer and our co-producers here. And it's just like, I just can't highlight enough like how much, you know, not only like production support, but also emotional support through what's a really intense process like that, and creative support, the story support, how that collective effort is so important.
It's true. I was with a few of the subjects of my film were here last night, and they were asking, they understand that, you know, we do rough cut screenings along the way to test out cuts on people, and they say, who do you get to watch these like in progress cuts? And I'm like, other filmmakers. Yeah. And they say they're willing to do that for you. Yeah, like unbelievably. So Lucy, welcome to the club. The crazy thing in documentary, no, really, you can get people to watch cuts for free and give amazing feedback.
Get my family to watch a rough cut.
Everyone will do it, and you know. But I know, even with my first film, cold called I was not a filmmaker. I cold called a couple of people, Ramin Barani and Marshall Curry, to get advice on like what a sales agent was. They talked to me on the phone for an hour. I was like, this is insane. People are so generous in the documentary film world, especially so generous with their time, their advice, support, giving feedback. So please enlist us all in your next project.
Yes.
Gonna be sorry.
Well, I want to open it up to the audience to maybe ask a question or two. Yes, please, you.
This question's for Lucy.
We have a mic right here.
Oh, sorry. You're an activist out there, especially for the environment and whatnot. I know you work a lot with Greenpeace and all that. I know you're still riding the waves for this film right now to see how it takes off, but I didn't know if you had any inspiration already to think about future projects.
Oh, I'm definitely thinking about future projects. I am intrigued to do something scripted because now I'm ready to work with actors. And I've been working with actors 37 years I've been in the business. And I just never wanted to before for that chump factor, but I was just wrong. And now I know what I want to do. And I'm a little bit different to you because even though I am an activist, I get arrested and stuff and for what I believe in, that's not actually what I want to do in my art. And my main drive is I want to entertain you. I want to take you on a journey, and I love humanity in all its darkness and its light. That's what thrills me in life, is that we're not all square pegs, and we're not all whatever. But we're all square pegs. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say, and that's what I want to honor in my work. So we're all morally compromised at some point, and I'm going to. That's what I want to illuminate. So take you on a journey into humanity. I like real people. I'm not very interested in... I can't believe I got sucked into action television and sci-fi and fantasy and stuff. I'm not interested in any of that, actually. It was like a huge shock to me, and which is why I never thought I'd be in a place at Sundance. I'm actually I'll get upset if I'm so moved to be here. But what I want to do now is illuminate the human condition and love it, because Maya Angelou said nothing that is human can be alien to me, and that's really how I feel. So, and in a way that just entertains you, so that you don't have to work hard. In my films, I'm going to take you somewhere that you might not go on your own. That's my drive at the moment.
Yes, please. Yes, you.
So this is a question for everyone, but it was somewhat inspired during the conversation from Carla and Lucy, in the sense that you're coming from different parts of production, such as acting and editing. Just curious if, in jumping into directing, if there was any of those habits within the other pieces of production that you kind of carried over, and I guess conversely, if there's some of those habits in other pieces of production that you had to kind of unlearn, or it's like, well, this doesn't work as a director, or like any kind of feedback on that?
Yeah. That's a good question. I guess I'll answer, but if I continue this, and I really want to continue, I got the bag too. I'm like, yes. I want to continue both editing and directing my own films, but I knew coming in that I as a director, I was gonna get to know this subject matter much earlier and feel a responsibility for every single detail of Frida's life. And I knew that as an editor, I was gonna have a much harder time letting go of some details and very specific things that you need to for the service of the narrative, right? Because you really want you want to create an emotional, tight story, a journey for the audience. But I was aware of that from early on, so I made sure that I kind of created, a team that supported that I knew that I was gonna have a harder time with. And so I brought actually somebody that Lana has collaborated with, supervising editor David Teague, to really like help me, you know, let go of those things and build like a really beautiful story. And like, you know, and those conversations were incredibly useful for me with him. And again, my producer was a creative producer, so I knew that like I had that support that I could lean on. You know, like wearing those two hats. But there's a lot of like learning to be done. I mean, it's again like a lot of it is like pitching the project, getting funding. That was like very new to me, and you know, and it was hard to get used to it. To get used to like continue talking about the project like really early on, when we didn't have like, you know, a finished product in our hands yet. How about you, Lucy?
Oh, what was the question? Acting. Is acting useful in this? I didn't have to unlearn it. I think I had to learn its value, because I got a lot of, well, you're new at this, so we're going to, you know, give you... And I had to learn... I was very sensitive to the fact that I didn't know everything, so I kind of made this assumption I don't know anything, so I'm going to suck in every bit of knowledge from everybody who's done this before.
Yeah.
And I had to let that fall away a little bit in the end, because they weren't going to make my film. Those people were not in sync with my thoughts. And I wish I'd had, obviously, I wish I had a little more time, because I would have gone deeper. But we wanted to get into Sundance, so we had to hurry up and finish. And there was a lot of archives, so that was difficult. Anyway, I think, no, I had to integrate it into my role rather than reject it. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know anything to add to that, but you know, I hear what you're saying, Lucy, about how you can get all advice from other people. You've worked with directors, so you can get advice. How do you do this and that and that? But then ultimately, you have to go your own way, you know? And I didn't go to film school, and I haven't actually worked for another director before. So I've sometimes been plunged into situations where, you know, someone on the crew says, that's not really how it's done. You're supposed to da-da-da-da. Sometimes that can be a good, helpful learning experience. Sometimes I'm just like, I understand this is not the way things are typically done, but we're doing this my way. Yes, and that's okay too. You know, it's
when to break the mold. You're right.
Yeah.
Like, so I know you think this isn't going to work, but I feel it will. Yeah. And just do it my way, for God's sake. So you want to have an editor like Carla who wants to slave to your vision, because that's just such a gift from God to have someone like her.
I have to say, I mean, I worked with a lot of directors before as an editor, and that confidence in one's vision and knowing what your film is about is so, you know, I mean, it really guides the whole process. You know, like, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it my way. And that was a learning curve for me. But having seen like other directors do it and like respecting that so much, because as an editor, when you know what your film is about and that's how you come in, you can even see it in the footage, like the way that you've shot it. It's just like, this director really knows what they want to say. And so I tried to do that as a director, and I was very conscious of it. So thank you to directors for teaching me that.
Well, we love the festival, so being here and the festival so much, and you have so much to do with your films coming up. But I'm just curious on a personal note, like, what are you looking forward to after the end of the festival?
I have a good answer for that, because it's again the obsession, right? I thought I was gonna take a couple of months off, because it's been a very, a year and a half of like a lot of intensity and work. And I can't, like, I'm obsessed again. And I'm like, I took Christmas off, but I like went right into it. And there's a story that I really want to tell it. And I think I'm the right to tell it. Ooh. I'm the right person to tell it. So
give us a
not yet. It's like really, like I started actually like researching last week. So I'm really excited about it.
We're not going to steal your idea.
All I said is I'm seeing it as a heist film with great music. So it's going to be like a documentary that is like a heist drama film.
Awesome.
Love it.
That's awesome. How about you, Lucy? What are you looking forward to?
What am I looking forward to? My film starts with this woman Margaret Moth shows up in Texas and can remember nothing of her past. She's 30 years old, and she takes up with a 17-year-old boy. And they go on this rampage of drugs and punk music and goodness knows whatever else. You have to see the film. And that guy starts and ends the film. And he died really shockingly, not unexpectedly, but shockingly, not suicide, but right before Christmas, and never got to see the film. But I was telling, the night before, maybe even an hour before he died, I was talking to him, telling him about some of the funny things he said, and he was laughing about it. I feel like he died laughing about that, which makes me happy. But I'm hoping that we go back and do a screening at his hometown, and it'll be a wonderful healing thing for his family to see him young and beautiful. And that'll be good for me too, because he was such a friend and a unicorn, special person. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I'm looking for a little bit like Carla. I did like jump into the next thing and be very excited. And there's a project I'm working on, and I have 2 fiction scripts that I really want to do. One written by David Teague, collaborator previously mentioned. One that I wrote myself that I would really am excited to do this year. But I'm also trying to not immediately plunge in, but to take at least a few weeks to kind of soak in everything coming from getting to screen, look into my eyes here. Those audience reactions especially are just the most meaningful thing. You know, it's hard sometimes to remind yourself to like slow down, let it sink in, enjoy how beautiful hearing about those different experiences and reactions with your film are, because that is this kind of food for your soul that I think gives you fuel to then make it over the mountain with the next project. So that's what I'm personally going to try to make myself do over the next few weeks.
That's great. Well, we don't have we have to wrap up. It's the end of the conversation, but I just want to say thank you so much for doing this, and I hope everyone will see your amazing films, and just thank you for talking and sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks
so
for coming,
much.
guys.
Thank you for coming.